antagonists. These are people the gringos feel are safer. Some of Trujillo's old cronies who are tired of the old man. Their only ideology is, well, you know. He patted his pockets. Then why do you say there's hope? Let them bring down the old man, and then we'll take over. Dr. Viñas grinned, his fat little cheeks lifting his glasses. It's not what we planned, I reminded him. One must have a left hand, he said, showing me his left hand. I found I was wringing both of my hands, swallowing to keep the tickle in my throat from erupting into another coughing fit. Isn't there anything we can do? He nodded, one sure, deep nod. What you can do is keep our hopes up. You're an example, you know. The whole country looks to you. When I made a face, he frowned. I'm quite serious, he said. There was a knock at the door. We both jumped. Amorcito, a sweet voice called. I have your little cafecito here. And the world of diminutives closed in again on us. For Manolo, I lifted out the bad news like a fishbone and gave him the promising tidbit that the gringos were working with a group to slaughter the goat for the picnic. Manolo had not heard this. His face tensed up. I don't like it. The gringos will take over the revolution. They'll take over the country, I thought to myself. I didn't say it out loud. No use depressing him any more than he already was. And at this point, I didn't care enough. I was so desperate for Trujillo to be gone. Like Viñas said, we could fix the future later. Tell Viñas, Manolo began. I rolled my eyes to indicate the guard approaching behind him. Out loud, I went on. The children miss you so much. The other day, I asked them what they wanted for Benefactors' Day, and they said, Bring Papi home. Manolo? He was not listening. I could tell. His eyes had a faraway look I recognized from my own days in this horrible place. I touched his face to bring him back. Mi amor, just remember, soon, Montecristi. I hummed the song. No singing, the guard announced. He had stopped in front of us. Sorry, soldier. I recognized good hair under the brim of his cap. I nodded at him, but his eyes were cold and flat, as if he did not know me. We were just saying goodbye. Today our interview was shorter than usual, since I was sharing my 20 minutes with Manolo's mother, who had driven down from Montecristi. Just before I came upstairs, we spoke briefly in the warden's office. She had a surprise she promised to tell me later. I waited alone in the car with the radio on low. No music allowed. Just being in the prison yard was bringing back waves of that old panic. To distract myself, I fiddled with the radio dials, hoping Rufino would get back soon so I'd have someone to talk to. He was making the rounds, distributing the cigarettes and pesos we always brought the guards, to encourage them to treat our prisoners right. The visitors started filing past the checkpoint at the big exit door. Suddenly, Doña Fefita appeared, weeping, Mate and Patria on either side of her. My heart sank, remembering how depressed Manolo had been today. I hurried up to them. What's wrong? Mate and Patria shrugged. They didn't know. And before Doña Fefita could say, the guards shouted for us to move along. We were not allowed to congregate in the prison yard, but down the road we stopped both cars. Doña Fefita began crying again as she recounted what had happened. She had arranged to buy the little house Manolo and I had lived in, but instead of being pleased, Manolo had snapped at her. Didn't she know that the only way he was going to come home was in a box? This made my legs go weak beneath me. but I couldn't let my own devastation show. Now, Doña Fefita, he's just worn out. That place. I cast a glance over her shoulder. My sisters joined in with their reassurances. We've got to keep our spirits up for the men. But when our eyes met, it was not a look of optimism that we exchanged. Doña Fefita finally calmed down. So, should I buy it, Minerva? Should I? It was hard for me to go against Manolo's wishes. We had always decided things together. Maybe you should wait. She heard the hesitation in my voice and went on, more determined. I'll take it upon myself. I want you to have a place to go to when this is all over. She had put my feeling in words exactly. A place to go to when this is all over. But her generosity was not allowed. A very short time later, I received notice to remove our possessions from the premises. The Seam were opening a new office in Monte Cristi. And so Dede and I set out in the pickup on Monday morning to do as we were bid. Rufino was our driver, since Jaimito, short-handed, couldn't take time off from the cacao harvest. He had not wanted Dede to accompany me either, but she said she could not allow me to dismantle my house alone. We planned to be back Wednesday afternoon, in time for me to go with Mate and Patria to La Victoria the next day. Ah, the busy life of house arrest. Peña had immediately granted me permission for the trip to Monte Cristi. After all, as head of the Northern Seam, he knew exactly why my old house needed to be vacated. He was probably the mastermind. The drive north turned out to be one of those sunny moments that come even in the darkest days. My gloominess fell away as if we were on holiday. I hadn't spent time alone with Dede since we were cooped up in Ojo de Agua together, two young girls waiting for their lives to happen. I knew she had mustered up all her courage to come along. The way she kept looking behind us when we first hit that isolated stretch of highway. But she soon settled down and was lively and talkative, as if to distract us from the sad mission we were on. Rufino, I said, wouldn't Dede make a great gavillera? We were having a whistling contest, and Dede had just won with a piercing trill. Gavillera? Me? Are you crazy? Dede laughed. I wouldn't have lasted a day up in those hills. I would have given myself up to those good-looking gringos. Gringos? Good-looking? Mujer! I made a face. All I could think of was how they had deserted Viñas and his men. They looked like somebody stuck them in a bucket of bleach and forgot they were there. That goes for their passion, too. How would you know about their passion? Dede challenged. You've never even known a gringo. Or have you kept something from me, my dear? She gave her shoulders a saucy shimmy. Rufino looked away. Why not let Rufino decide? I said. What do you think, Rufino? Are gringos good-looking? He smiled. Lines deepened on either side of his mouth. A man doesn't know if another man is handsome, he said at last. I found a way around that by invoking his wife. Would Delisa say gringos are good-looking? His jaw tightened. She had better keep her eyes to herself. Dede and I looked at each other and smiled. Feeling happy, I congratulated myself on asking Dede to come along. Now she'd see that her fears were unfounded. The roads were not full of murderers. As unreal as it seemed, in the midst of our troubles, that glorious, ordinary life went on without us. There was a campesino with his donkey loaded down with charcoal. There was a truck with its flatbed full of girls giggling and waving at us. There, under the blue sky, was the turquoise sea, sparkling with holiday promises. Suddenly and incomprehensibly to us, in our carefree state, just around a curve, a car was parked across the road. Rufino had to slam on the brakes, and Dede and I were thrown against each other. 5 calillas in dark glasses swarmed around the pickup and ordered us out of the cab. I will never forget the terror on Dede's face, how she reached for my hand, how, when we were asked to identify ourselves, what she said was, I will never forget this. She said, "My name is Minerva Mirabal." In Montecristi, we were taken into a dim little guardhouse in back of the fort. I could see why they needed new quarters. A nervous man with worried eyes apologized for any discomfort. The escort had been a precaution. People had heard that Minerva Mirabal was coming to town today, and there were rumors that there might be some sort of commotion. "Which one of you is Minerva Mirabal?" he asked, watching us through his cigarette smoke. The little finger on his left hand had a long, claw-like nail. I found myself wondering what it was for. "I'm Minerva," I said, looking firmly at Dede. That old man at Missing Persons we'd met years back flashed through my head. If he could give all 15 sons the same name, why not do Minervas in the Mirabal family? Our interrogator glanced suspiciously from one to the other, then addressed Dede. "Why did you tell my men you were Minerva?" Dede could barely talk. She's my little sister." Little sister, indeed. I had never been Dede's little sister, as far as character was concerned. It had always been the big problem between us. The man watched us, waiting. "She's Minerva," Dede finally agreed. "You're certain of this now?" the man asked without humor. He had sat back down and was nervously flicking a lighter that would not light. Sizing him up, I employed a skill I had acquired in prison with my interrogators. I decided this jumpy little man could be cowed. He was trying too hard. I pulled out our pass signed by Peña from my purse. As head of the Northern Division of the SEAM, he was certainly this man's superior. "Captain Peña has authorized this trip. I hope there will be no problems for us to report back to him." The paroxysm of blinking made me pity the poor man. His own terror was a window that opened onto the rotten weakness at the heart of Trujillo's system. No problems, just precautions." As we waited outside for Rufino to bring the pickup around, I could see him through the door of his office. He was already on the phone, probably reporting our arrival to Peña. While he spoke, he was cleaning the wax out of his ear with his little finger. I felt somehow relieved to know what that nail was for. At the little house, Dede had us all organized. This bunch of boxes to store at Doña Fefita's, this bunch to take back with us, this pile to give away. I had to smile. She was still the same old Dede who stocked the shelves of the family store so neatly, I always regretted having to sell anything. Now she was in the kitchen living room, making a clatter with the pots and pans. Every once in a while, she'd come in with something in her hand. Mama had given me some of her furnishings when she had moved to the new house. "I didn't know you had this." Dede held up the dainty oil lamp. Its pale rose chimney fluted like the petals of a flower. "Our old bedroom lamp, remember?" I had forgotten that Dede and I once shared a room before Mata and I paired up. Reminiscing with Dede was better than facing the flood of memories in the front room. Law books lay piled in a corner. Everything had been strewn on the floor. The porcelain donkey, our framed law degrees, the seashells Manolo and I had found on Morro Beach.